We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Back in studio with my guy, Anthony Treash, PFF_Anthony on Twitter. Encourage all of you guys to follow him on Twitter. Filling in for Mike Renner, who does not have COVID. We had a handful of people reaching out. Does Mike have COVID? He's still waiting for results back. He might have COVID, but we're quarantining him until we find out if he does have COVID. Prayers and thoughts out to Mike Renner. But Treash, Anthony, you're a great fill-in, I will say that.
Well, thank you. I had high expectations coming in. It's a lot lofty there to fill in for the Mike Renner, but so far so good, and we'll keep it rolling today.
Part of me thinks that he's only doing this to exclusively watch The Bachelorette by himself and relive the glory days. Because Mike Renner, if you don't know, was on The Bachelorette for like 2 or 3 episodes and still feels like he's a part of that culture. So now that The Bachelorette's back, I don't personally watch the show, but maybe he just needed a break to kind of get back into that space. I don't know. Do you watch The Bachelorette? What's your take on reality TV that's that garbage?
I do not. I'm not a big fan of reality TV unless it's Jersey Shore, but that is a very good point. I think that is a good conspiracy to make. I never even thought about that, but I think we might have to investigate that.
We honestly might. You know who does like reality TV? And this stunned me. George Chahuri, PFF's
Really?
Director of Content. That guy said he likes reality TV. He watches The Bachelorette religiously. I couldn't believe it because it's garbage TV. It's absolutely garbage. Mike Renner has some fantastic stories from The Bachelorette, by the way. He said, and I quote, "It is faker than anyone even says it is." You know, it is more fake. He said there was one time where a guy got voted off or whatever, and they drove him around. They had to take him to the airport. He's off. And they drove him around the car and said, "We will not drop you off at the airport until you cry in this vehicle." He said that. He told me, like, how insane is that? He also said that, like, they make you, like, they're in your ear and, like, go up and kiss her right now. Go up and tell her you love her. And it's like, dude, it's just wild stuff on The Bachelorette. Those guys have their hand in everything, the producers or whatever it may be. The Bachelorette.
My favorite story was the St. Patrick's Day one.
Oh, yeah, where Renner gets absolutely tanked at St. Patrick's Day. They end up cutting him off. And that is quintessential Renner, to be honest. That's who he is. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into this slate of games. We're going to start with college football, then pivot to the NFL, a handful of games, mentioning prospects in each one. Wanted to start with this one because I think this is an interesting storyline. Minnesota versus Maryland, and the biggest prospect in this game is Rashad Bateman. And Rashad Bateman, now wearing number 0. I don't know if you caught that in their first game back, but not only is he wearing number 0, but he's playing the Tyler Johnson role in this offense. He's playing in the slot almost exclusively, which, again, speaks to Tyler Johnson was the focal point of the Minnesota offense. They put him in the slot for a reason. They put him in the slot because that is what got fed targets in that offense, an RPO-heavy offense with Tanner Morgan and company. Now Rashad Bateman playing that same exact role. We're not going to see a ton of single coverage looks for him. He's going to see those same type of off-coverage concepts, finding holes in zones, etc. And he's performing well in it. But I think, again, and I've made this comment to Mike, the differences between Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson are not as vast as what their draft projections were. Tyler Johnson obviously dropping to the 5th round, while Rashad Bateman is coveted as this first rounder by many. The differences in their game aren't vast. Like, Rashad Bateman is not an elite athlete. Tyler Johnson was not an elite athlete. Rashad Bateman, I think, has better ball skills, better in contested catch situations, fewer drops. But, like, that is kind of the key separator for me because I think both of these guys are proficient route runners, decent after the catch. What is your opinion on Rashad Bateman now playing in the slot? How do you view him as a prospect and a college football player?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point to make. And I was kind of disappointed because I loved seeing him on the outside in single coverage because I thought he was great in that role. And he's great in the slot right now. He had a great game. He was one of the few bright spots on Minnesota last week in that ugly game against Michigan. But I think he is. I think you make a good point with that. He is a very good college player, but I'm afraid that some team might reach on him early in the first round, especially maybe over a guy like Jalen Waddle or Rondale Moore. I think there's better wide receivers out there, but granted, he is one of the best college wide receivers. But I do think the difference between he and Tyler Johnson, it's pretty marginal at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I'm going to hold on to that take as we get closer to the combine, as we get closer to this guy being a top 32 pick. I still don't think that the differences are that vast. And I'm not drafting Rashad Bateman over Jalen Waddle, Rondell Moore, even Devontae Smith. Like, I think he is not that much of a difference maker of these guys who have legitimate speed and legitimate, like, deep threat ability. But and I'm not saying he's not a good player, but we were higher on Tyler Johnson. We saw him as a high day 2 pick, even with the kind of off-field stuff. Talked to him a handful of times, interviewed him at the combine, interviewed him on the podcast. Never thought that he was this guy that, was talked about, had character concerns. People said character concerns were the reason he didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl. Said coaches didn't like him. Coaches didn't like him. That is just, he was playing the number one receiver in that offense. He was the number one target, had the led in target share. A bulk majority of his targets were on first reads. If the coaches didn't like him, they didn't do a good job of showing it. Tyler Johnson obviously won't get a ton of run in Tampa Bay with Antonio Brown now signed, but did have some run there when they were battling injuries, and I thought he looked okay. Moving to Georgia versus Kentucky. The biggest name, I think, in this one is an edge defender that's kind of on the rise in the NCAA right now. It's an Azeez Ojulari. Have you watched a ton of Azeez? Because he's going against a very good tackle tandem, and Darian Kennard and Landon Young, 2 guys that have graded well for Kentucky and for PFF so far this year. I like Azeez Ojulari. I think he's better than a lot of the Georgia edge defenders that have come out, guys that are like pure run defending types that play inside at the next level. I think he can actually bend the edge and make some moves.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of surprised to see that he's been this good this early. I mean, he's just outside the top 10 in the FBS in both pass rush grade and pass rush win rate. And as you said, this is going to be a very interesting thing because Landon Young and Darian Kennard have been playing really, really good. And Darian Kennard specifically, I mean, last year he was an elite run blocker, but still had his flaws in pass protection. But so far, so good this year in pass protection. And I think it's going to be Azeez and Georgia that's going to win this matchup, though, just because some of the pass rushes Kirby Smart likes to dial up there. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a huge test for him, and I think this is going to be kind of like the defining moment for both Darian Kennard and Landon Young as to, what really their NFL future looks like in their draft stock.
Yeah, I mean, for Azeez Ojulari, he's not like your prototypical Georgia defensive end. He's only 6'3", 240. These other guys that have come out have been like 6'5", 280. These guys that kind of stand up offensive tackles. And you look at his splits here, he's played a bulk majority of his snaps at right defensive end, but he's also played over 30 snaps at left defensive end. He should see a little bit of a share between Landon Young and Darian Kennard. I definitely would put this one on. If you're watching Azeez Ojulari as a prospect, I think this is a tape you're going to go back to. This is a tape you should watch live. I'm very interested to see how he rises to the occasion. Azeez, through now 4 games, has 3 pressures, at least 3 pressures in every game, an 84.3 PFF pass rushing grade, and an 89.4 PFF grade overall across 160 defensive snaps. Jumping to, I'm excited for this game because I think Michigan has some freaking talent this year. Michigan versus Michigan State. I don't know how much Michigan State stays in this game. They're coming off a loss to Rutgers, but I still think this is a fun one to watch for the talent that's in this one. Let's start along the defensive line. 2 of my favorite players in the country right now, Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson. I can say so many positive things, but I'll let you start. Where are you on those 2?
Yeah, I wasn't as high on Kwity Paye as you and Mike were, but last week it turned me around because he absolutely just dominated Minnesota's offensive line. Had the best game of his career from a pass rushing perspective. Had 7 pressures, 88.3 pass rush grade. And we knew he was a freak athlete. It was just kind of the technique that we were really focusing on. And I thought he was a little bit better, looked better in that game as opposed to last season. So I think he's going to be a star. I really do think he's going to continue this on. Aiden Hutchinson didn't really have the best game, but I'm not putting too much stock into that because of his last year. But I mean, one positive with Michigan State, Drew Beasley. He was our breakout candidate in the PFF College magazine. And last week he did go off against Rutgers, even though everyone else kind of stunk. 89.4 pass rush grade. So that's another edge rusher to watch in this one.
Yeah, I had Drew Beasley highlighted as well. But Kwity Paye this past week, 69 total defensive snaps, an 84.1 PFF grade, and an 88.3 pass rushing grade. 7 pressures, 2 sacks. I mean, this guy looked incredible. I'm glad you brought up the technique because the biggest flaw with him in 2019 was, yes, he's this athlete, but he doesn't have any moves. Like, he literally had no moves. He was like bull rushing inside shoulders and stuff. But now I saw him win with his hands. I saw him win multiple ways in this game. That is super encouraging for his stock. And as for Aiden Hutchinson, Mike is a big fan. Sees him as this like kind of Zach Allen type, the former Boston College defensive end that now plays for the Arizona Cardinals in like that 3-4 look. I think Aiden Hutchinson can kind of be that guy at the next level. Has good size. Not a Chase Winovich. Yes, he's a white Michigan defensive end, but he's not a Chase Winovich. Doesn't have the same bend or the athleticism, the burst. But I still think he can be a productive player in the NFL. One of those high floor edge defender types. A couple other names here. Two names I want to bring up on the offensive side for Michigan: Ronnie Bell and Joe Milton. There's some hype building around these two. I know our podcast assistant, David Sofaro, is a Michigan guy. Joe Milton, he's a big fan of Joe Milton. What's your opinion of Milton? I didn't love his first game. I think the box score looked good for him, but I didn't love his first game with Michigan. What's your opinion on Joe Milton and Ronnie Bell, the receiver?
Yeah, Joe Milton, I'm not going to make a big take on him quite yet because a lot of that production was schemed. There was a lot of screens, a lot of play action, a lot of RPOs in there, a lot of quick throws. That's kind of why we saw Boye Mafe from Minnesota. He really didn't have a great game from a pass rushing perspective because he didn't get those true pass rush opportunities. So I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, Joe Milton's going to be great or he's going to suck. I need to see more from him. So that's kind of where I stand on Joe Milton. As for Ronnie Bell, the biggest thing he had to do is clean up the drops because last year he had a lot of them, 8 drops on 83 targets there, but didn't have any against Minnesota. So far, so good. But yeah, I'm more confident in the Michigan defense than I am the offense at this point. I don't think quite yet this can go up with an Ohio State type of team.
Yeah, there's reasons to be, have concerns on the Michigan offense, especially just through one game sample size. But I will say about Ronnie Bell, and I've talked to some other people, some other draft analysts, some guys that are watching college football this year. They're fans of this guy. There are some stands for Ronnie Bell. 6 foot, 190 pounds. This past, in the week prior, 4 receptions on 5 targets for 74 yards and 2 missed tackles. And I think in 2019 he had 14 total missed tackles on 46 receptions. When you're 6 foot 190, you got to break tackles. You have to make moves after the catch because you're not going to be this dominant outside receiver 9 times out of 10 in the NFL. So seeing that forced missed tackle ability, I think, is big for him. I think that's another name I'll be watching in addition to the 2 defensive ends and obviously Drew Beasley, as you highlighted. Let's jump to now LSU versus Auburn. There's another Ojulari that's playing well in the SEC, and it's B.J. Ojulari of LSU. He's one of the highest graded players in college football right now, specifically along the edge. Which Ojulari is better? I think Azeez Ojulari has a better matchup to see kind of his skill set. Auburn not as good of offensive tackles here, but B.J. Ojulari has looked really good in recent weeks.
Yeah, I've been kind of stunned with how good. I mean, Eli Ricks was the young player on the LSU defense that I was circling before the year to highlight and watch, and he's been great. But B.J. Ojulari, 20% win rate in every single game he's played in. Dude. This week, he's going up against Alec Jackson, and he has not been good at all whatsoever this year. He's allowed 18 pressures, 43.2 pass block grade. That's one of the bottom 5 in the SEC. It's going to be those two are going to go head to head, and I think B.J. Ojulari is going to continue that streak of a 20+% win rate.
Yeah, he's not draft eligible this year. This is a very young player. Wears number 8 for LSU, 6'2", 230. Still needs to add some weight to that frame, but out of the gate here, 104 total snaps, has an 87.3 PFF grade and an 86.6 pass rushing grade, 13 pressures on the year. He's got some juice, man. This guy explodes out of his stance. I'm excited to continue to watch him. This is his first year playing, obviously at LSU. An underclassman, what Michael and I call him. You're probably not familiar, but a fake ID candidate. We'll let him into the bar. We'll let him into the podcast, but not draft eligible. So we'll see how it goes down the line here.
Say what you will about this LSU defense, though, but they have a lot of young talent with B.J. Ojulari, who we just now found out, Cordell Flott, Derek Stingley, Eli Ricks. I mean, next year, this is going to be a good LSU defense. I know Bo Pelini, they got toasted against Mississippi State the first week, and they just really have not been great this year.
They haven't gelled, though. I mean, and Stingley didn't even play in that game. I feel like they're definitely looking for new leadership. They're looking for a new identity on the defensive side of the ball and offensive side of the ball. And I think having those gap years in college football is not uncommon, especially when you're introducing a ton of new talent like they are. So Miles Brennan needs to pick things up. The receiving core, though, is still stacked. Let's talk Terence Marshall, man. Terence Marshall, was not a huge fan of going into the year. And I think the biggest reason for that was you just didn't see a ton of single coverage looks. You didn't see him beating man a ton. But now this year, playing more in the slot and all that stuff, I think Terence Marshall has similar traits to Justin Jefferson, similar athleticism in that he can be this like athlete on the football field and get what the defense is giving him. And I'm not willing to fade him just because I'm not seeing a ton of single coverage looks, because this guy is getting it done in the SEC. And I think that in and of itself is impressive.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson has been teaching us
yeah.
that lesson this year. But yeah, I'm right there with you on Terence Marshall. Last year with Joe Burrow, he had a lot of touchdowns, boatload of touchdowns, but a lot of those touchdowns came from a coverage bust, right at the goal line, screens just right at the goal line. I mean, there was a lot of easy walk-in touchdowns. Me or you could have scored the touchdown if we were Terence Marshall out there, but he hasn't really had that this year. I agree with you. I think he's been performing a lot better than what we saw last year. So it's good to see that he's improved without Joe Burrow, because I think that was just kind of the big concern with the LSU receivers last year. Like, how much was it Joe Burrow or how much was it, them?
Yeah, I mean, yards per reception right now is up at 19. He had 14.6 this previous year, 9 touchdowns already on 27 receptions so far this year. 4 drops, which is a bit of a concern with only 35 targets. But Terence Marshall is at least a name to watch. 6'3", 200, has some decent speed, decent athleticism. Pivoting to Auburn side of the ball, specifically defense. 2 guys that have graded well or are high on people's radar as prospects: Roger McCreary, one of the higher graded cornerbacks in the SEC, and Jamie Sherwood, wears number 20 for Auburn. Dude plays with his hair on fire, beats people up down in the line of scrimmage. One of my favorite kind of safety off-ball linebacker prospects. I don't know, he's too small probably to play off-ball linebacker, but he's got like this linebacker mentality that I can get behind. Have you watched a ton of McCreary, Sherwood? What's your opinion on those two?
Yeah, I think Roger McCreary is the best player Auburn has on either side of the ball. I mean, they've been really lucky this year against Arkansas and Ole Miss, and even dating back to that first game, Roger McCreary, I think, won that game against Kentucky because Auburn got lucky. They were about to go down to touchdown at halftime. Christian Rodriguez clearly scored a touchdown, but they said he was down at the goal line. Terry Wilson throws a pick to Roger McCreary, kind of saves the game for him, gets that swing there. So I mean, last year he proved he could go toe to toe with the best in press coverage. I think he's been great this year. I think he is easily the best player on either side of the ball for him.
I mean, 81.1 PFF coverage grade in 2019, only allowed a 55% completion percentage and had 10 passes defense. Like, he was on my radar in 2019. He was balling out for Auburn in the previous season. So far this year, a 77.4 coverage grade, has allowed 11 receptions from 18 targets for just 148 yards, 3 TDs, and 2 picks. Last guy we'll mention, a guy that some people are calling this guy as a potential Heisman candidate, which I think they're also on crystal meth. So like that, you can kind of rule that out. But Tank Bigsby actually looks pretty legit as a running back prospect. Has forced a ton of missed tackles this year. Has got a good build. I know running backs don't matter, but watching running backs is still fun. Okay, Anthony, Tank Bigsby, I think, is one of those fun players to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I want whatever those people are smoking there if they think he's a Heisman candidate. But he's been on fire these last 3 games for him. I mean, he's produced an explosive run of 10 or more yards on nearly a quarter of his carries. Overall in the year, 30 broken tackles on 74 carries. That is
his forced missed tackle rate, I think, is the best in the country, if not top 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous what he's doing. So I don't think he's a Heisman candidate, but he's playing extremely well given the lack of experience he has. I mean, 91.1 rushing grade there. So he's not a Heisman candidate, but I do like Tank Bigsby. He's one of my favorite names, too, in college football.
It's a great name.
It was
it's a freaking great name.
But I think I'm going with Tank Bigsby for
Smoke Monday. They have a handful of good names on Auburn. So Tank Bigsby, Smoke Monday. He's also caught 11 receptions from 13 targets for 84 yards and forced 2 missed tackles on those. I think definitely a name to watch in a running back class is kind of brewing a little bit. Michael Carter of UNC looks very good. The Virginia Tech running back, I'm forgetting his name, but he's
Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, Khalil Herbert, and then now Tank Bigsby. I think there's a handful of Travis Etienne, and then everyone else was kind of how I viewed the class going in. But now, Najee Harris too is not a sleeper. I wouldn't call him a sleeper, but he's a running back in this draft that people will flock to. Tank Bigsby, Michael Carter, Khalil Herbert are other guys that I think starting to mention, but I don't know if Tank Bigsby is an underclassman, right?
Yeah,
he's not going to the draft.
Yeah,
but
we still get a few more years of Tank.
Only true freshman or redshirt freshman?
True freshman.
True freshman doing it in the SEC. 30 broken tackles as a true freshman. Excuse me, that is freaking absurd. Jumping to now, Mississippi State versus Alabama. There's not a lot to like on the Mississippi State side of the ball from a prospect perspective, but this Alabama team is a laundry list. Devontae Smith, Mac Jones, Najee Harris we spoke to, Alex Leatherwood, the left tackle, and defensively, Patrick Surtain and Josh Jobe. those two defensive backs are grading well and could be legitimate prospects in 2021. Let's start with Devontae Smith. Now Jalen Waddle, obviously missing the entire season now with a broken ankle. He's going to get a lot more targets. He's going to see an increase in target share. So will John Mechie, the Canadian board underclassman. Devontae Smith doesn't have the same speed as in Henry Ruggs or Jalen Waddle, but the ball skills, the route running ability, he can still win vertically on these valuable routes down the field. I'm a huge fan of Devontae Smith. I know you are as well. How do you see this increase in target share playing out for his draft stock?
Yeah, I mean, right now he's the second highest graded wide receiver in college football. Yeah, I don't think that's going to change.
Does he just become the first graded? Maybe.
Yeah, he might become the number one graded. And I don't even think the speed is that big of a concern. I mean, he still stacks some guys.
Yes, exactly.
A lot. I would say 4.4s, mid 4.4s, high 4.4s. That's no concern at all. I mean, he kind of makes up for, not having Jalen Waddle, Henry Ruggs type of speed with everything else he does. I mean, despite that small frame, the dude can go toe-to-toe in contested situations and come away with the win. So, I mean, the ball skills are tremendous. So I think he is going to end up the best wide receiver in college football. And eventually we're going to get Mike to put him near the top of that draft board.
Yes. I still think, and I'll say this, and I wasn't on board with this, early in 2019, but I still think I would take Jalen Waddle ahead of Devontae Smith, just because in the same vein, you're kind of taking Henry Ruggs over Jerry Jeudy or reason in the NFL because you're looking for this absolute explosiveness. I wasn't on board with that. I would have rather had Jerry Jeudy over Henry Ruggs. I still had him as one of the better receivers in that class, but still, you get it. You get why teams would, rather have the faster, more explosive player because that's what wins in the NFL right now. Having speed, having those vertical threats is huge for offenses in the NFL. Devontae Smith isn't a Tyreek Hill, isn't a Henry Ruggs or Jalen Waddle, but he still provides, I think, true number one wide receiver at the next level. Some people have him pegged in the 4.5s. He breaks 4.4s, dude. This guy's not leaving the first round. I don't think he leaves the first 20 picks.
Do you think right now would you take Devonta Smith over Rondale Moore?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think Rondale Moore, just because of the unknown, the speed, it depends. I think Rondale Moore goes to the combine. I think the combine's going to be big for Rondale Moore because if he is that freak athlete, runs like a freaking 6.5 3 cone and it runs in the low 4.4s, 4.3s, I'm on Rondale Moore. I'm in. I saw it as a true freshman in 2018 against Ohio State, TCU, etc. I'm all in. But if he doesn't live up to this like insane athlete hype, and you have the injuries, and you have the size concerns, then I start to get more on board with the production, what I've seen from Devontae Smith. I hate to say the combine has that much weight for me, but I do think it's important because we're not going to see a lot of Rondale Moore. Call it what it is. Even when he does come back for Purdue, you're not going to see a ton of Rondale Moore. What is going to matter is the combine and what you do know of him as an athlete. They're close, though. They're close for me for sure. A couple more names we'll mention. Mac Jones is having a stellar year, one of the highest graded quarterbacks, Najee Harris. But what I want to talk is Patrick Surtain, the outside quarterback for Alabama, a bigger corner that is a little bit slower. Better athlete than Trayvon Diggs, but a little bit slower, not this like elite athlete that plays well in press, has good length, but can get beat deep over the top against better athletes. Similar concerns to Trayvon Diggs. Where are you at with him? I know he has the NFL bloodlines. So does Trayvon Diggs. Where are you at with Surtain? I'm not ready to fall in love with one of these guys again because I was a big fan of Trayvon Diggs. Graded super well for us. The stats were insane. Really good in press. But Patrick Surtain, again, is not going to test like an elite athlete like Jeffrey Okudah or some of these other guys that were drafted highly. Where are you at with him right now?
Yeah, I think Patrick Surtain and Josh Jobe, I think they're the best cornerbacks in the SEC, some of the best in all of college football. And I think Surtain, he kind of proved like the last 2 years, he locked down some of the best wide receivers in the SEC. I mean, he was a lockdown guy, and it's truly rare to see the kind of production and just the yards per coverage snaps numbers he allowed in the SEC in that span. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think there is some concern about getting beat deep downfield, but he's not going to lose many contested balls with this length. I mean, he's great at the catch point. So I think right now, I think Patrick Surtain I know he's a great college corner. I'm just a little concerned. I know some people are putting him up there top 5, top 10 status. Yikes. And I do like him, but I don't know if I'd go that far.
I think testing is going to be super important for him. Like if you're not running a 4.4 at outside corner, you're going to be locked into a press-only scheme. And Trayvon Diggs has not been playing a ton of press in Dallas. Like, they have not run the scheme that fits his skill set. And when in press, he's had some better plays in the NFL. But when he's in off coverage, when he's asked to do other things, he's either lost or burnt. That's been the problem for Trayvon Diggs. And I think Surtain could be in a similar spot, if not given that opportunity to get his hands on guys at the line of scrimmage. Definitely, even though Mississippi State's going to be a little bit of not that great of an opponent, turn on every Alabama game because you're going to see some stars wearing crimson.
Do you think some NFL teams are going to look at Trayvon Diggs and then kind of get a little worried with Patrick
I don't know.
Surtain?
I think the teams that were off of Trayvon Diggs and had him go into the second round or whatever are going to be the same teams that are going to be off Patrick Surtain, knowing that he's not a guy that will fit in our scheme. He's not a guy that has the athleticism we need at the cornerback position or that we value at the cornerback positions. Because there are teams that have legit cutoffs in terms of athleticism, 3-cone, 40 for the corners that they do bring in, length, all that type of stuff. So I think there are going to be teams that are off of him. He's not going to be like an Okudah. Okudah has all the tools you need. Former 5-star, the production at Ohio State, experience in man coverage. He had all the tools to be number 3, top 5 pick or whatever it was. That is not Patrick Surtain for me. We'll see how the season plays out, though. All right. Missouri versus Florida. A ton of Florida talent in this one. But before we get to Florida, Nick Bolton, one of the highest graded, or if not the highest graded coverage linebacker in 2019. A guy who's a crazy athlete. Love how he plays the game, plays with his hair on fire, wants to kill people. There's that hit against, I think it was Tennessee on Juwan Jennings at the goal line where it's okay, there's only a handful of linebackers in the NFL that even have, the stones to make this type of hit or the athleticism, the explosiveness. I think this guy's going to be in the running for top 2, top 3 linebackers in this class. And what is, I think, a very good off-ball linebacker class, unlike last year.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to crack the top 2. I do think he's number 3 there. I like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah just a little bit more, but he was one that I was kind of worried about coming into this year to see how much he regressed, just because last year he had a lot of great interceptions in there. I was curious to see if he was able to sustain that. And he hasn't had many plays on ball, but as you said, the guy is playing with his hair on fire. Exactly. I mean, he's still grading out in the high 70s. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from Nick Bolton so far, but I don't think he cracks the second spot. I mean, obviously Micah Parsons locked up.
Yeah, I mean, Micah Parsons of Penn State, who isn't even playing this year, opted out of the draft for good reason, is a generational talent at off-ball linebacker. I think with the best linebacker prospect we've really seen since Luke Kuechly. After that, I think it's going to be a battle between Bolton of Missouri, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah of Notre Dame, guy who can play slot corner in the NFL, even the guy has absurd athleticism, and I'll throw this guy in there too, Dylan Moses. I really do like Dylan Moses. He is a very good athlete, a guy that you can do a lot of things with. I think he can play along the edge. This guy is a specimen. They just built different. I think he's a guy that will be in that conversation for top linebacker, not top linebacker, but top 3, top 4 linebackers in this class. Florida now. And we're going to get to Kyle Trask. Don't you worry, Tony. We're going to get to Kyle Trask. But let's start with my guy, Bretton Cox Jr. on the defensive side. He's been one of the more impressive edge defenders in college football. Had 2 really, really nice spin moves so far this year that you can't pull off if you don't have juice. You can't pull off if you don't have athleticism. He's also beat some guys outside. He's been one of the more impressive athletes along the edge I've seen this year, because we're not seeing Gregor Rousseau. We didn't see Jason Oweh until this past week. Brenton Cox Jr. is a name to know in this edge class.
Yeah, he's looking like that 5-star recruit that originally was going to Georgia a few years ago. He's 3rd in pass rush grade this year. He's had 5 pressures in every single game played. I'm really impressed with Brenton Cox. I was kind of curious to see how he would kind of break out, if he would break out this year, just because he didn't play in 2019. There's some situations there. So, I mean, I really like what I'm seeing from Brenton Cox. All
right, Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney, 2 of the best pass catchers on Florida's team right now. I think Kadarius Toney is, really developing and cementing himself as one of the better receivers in college football. Before it was get him more touches and I swear he'll be good. He's getting those touches now, and you're seeing not only is he really good after the catch, not only is he a forced missed tackle waiting to happen, but he can actually run legitimate routes. He can create separation against single coverage. Really impressed with what both Pitts and Toney have done. But I'm giving you the floor. You wrote an article on Kyle Trask. The box score on PFF.com. Definitely encourage you guys to check that out. The nutshell or the nut graph of the article really is that Kyle Trask, as good as the box score has been, as good as this offense has been for Florida, more praise should be thrown at the coaches and the offensive coordinator for Florida and the supporting cast that is Pitts, that is Toney, then that should be thrown at Trask, because a lot of this production has been schemed for him. Open throws have been created for him, and he's still making some mistakes, still has some negatively graded plays. It doesn't have the positively graded play rate that other quarterbacks in the SEC or college football have right now.
Yeah, and I'm not saying Kyle Trask is a bad quarterback. He's still finding the open receiver. He is making the right reads. That's what you want. But again, it is more of the supporting cast and the coaches that is responsible for this great box score. Dan Mullen is helping scheme some wide open receivers, and positively graded throw rate is kind of the negatively graded throw rate, obviously it's in the quarterback's control. That's more stable. But positively graded throw rate, it tends to be kind of fluctuated there by the supporting cast usually. Mm-hmm. But when you have a situation like Kyle Trask where he has a low positively graded throw rate, but his box score is through the roof, it's nuts, then that kind of raises some red flags that there are way easier throws in there, because even then those positively graded throws are positively graded for a reason. They're a little bit more difficult, they're deeper downfield, but he's had a lot of easy open underneath targets that they've taken 30 yards downfield. Yep. And when you're looking at the success of Florida's offense, that most of those plays have come from guys like Kadarius Toney, Kyle Pitts. So I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I mean, he's still, from a decision-making perspective, it's night and day compared to what it was last year. He was a statue last year in the pocket. He's getting a little bit better, in that regard. But I don't think Kyle Trask is that first-round type of quarterback. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but I think when you're talking about, who's going to be the fourth or fifth guys taken after Lawrence, Fields, and Lance, I don't think Kyle Trask is in that conversation yet. But going back to Kadarius Toney, I've been really impressed with his route running. That was one thing I needed to see, and the guy has run some crisp routes and burnt some dudes, and Kyle Pitts too, and he's on pace to break PFF college records right now. So I'm excited about those two, but again, the Florida's offense is one of the best in college football, but it's more about the receivers and the play calling and the scheme than Kyle Trask himself. And when you're going back, you're looking at the Ole Miss game. He had an elite PFF grade, but we're finding out that Ole Miss team might have the worst SEC defense we've ever seen in the PFF college era. So we have to take that with a grain of salt. Some of the big-time throws he had were, they're still difficult throws. They're big-time throws for a reason, but Ole Miss handed it right to him. There were a lot of easy ones in there for him. So yeah, I need to see more from Kyle Trask before I even say he's a great or elite quarterback. So I would just say be cautious, be alarmed. I'm really looking forward to seeing him play Georgia. That's going to be, I think, the defining game. And
that's a big game.
Yeah.
That'll be a big game for him. One more prospect I wanted to mention quickly here before we jump to the next game is Larry Borum, the offensive tackle for Missouri, a guy that's graded super well this year, 84.2 overall grade and an 84.5 pass blocking grade. And he's 6'6", 330. This guy's a big dude. Having a breakout year for Missouri, played over 750 snaps in 2019, just a 69.6 pass blocking grade, has taken that next step this year. Another prospect to look at in that game. All right, moving forward here, you added this game, Texas versus Oklahoma State. You want to watch some Sam Ehlinger.
Yeah, and mostly just because it looked like he might even take that next step forward this year. I know me and Seth have talked about it a lot. We maybe thought he could maybe get to that Heisman consideration.
So did Mike, to be fair.
Yeah, and just because you look at his passing grade, it went from around 81 to 86 last year. This year, it's back down to 70. And I think he's going to turn it around because most of his worst plays have come outside the pocket. He has the third lowest passing grade in the FBS outside the pocket. When you're looking at what he does when he's inside the pocket, free from pressure, he's been pretty good. But this Oklahoma State defense, this is not a normal Big 12 defense. This is a good defense that I think would be considered one of the better ones in the Big 10 or the SEC. And a big reason for that is Rodarius Williams, Greedy Williams' little brother. Mm-hmm. He's kind of been a key cog for him for a little bit there. But this year, he's taken his play to a whole new level. Just 26 yards allowed on just over 100 coverage snaps at outside corner, 5 forced incompletions, just 4 catches allowed. They play man coverage right around, probably half the time. He's been lights out when he's in man coverage. So
they're avoiding him. That no one's targeting him. He only has 11 targets on the year, and he's played over 120 coverage snaps. That's insane. That's when because looking at the college level, you see it more often than you do in the NFL. Teams avoiding very good cornerbacks because you can afford to. The other guy is likely a very young player or not a high-star recruit. Rodarius Williams, on the other hand, is a guy that you should avoid playing Oklahoma State, and he's been avoided. Only allowed You mentioned 20-plus yards at outside corner, 35 total yards, all of which coming against Iowa State. Really impressive start for Rodarius. All right, moving quickly here. Ohio State versus Penn State. One of my favorite games of the year, every single year. So happy that we get it this year. We didn't think we were. Now we're getting Ohio State versus Penn State. Starting with Ohio State, Justin Fields, Chris Olave, the two big prospects for me. Wyatt Davis, too. Didn't have a great week 1 game, but still an impressive candidate. Potential first rounder in 2021. But Fields looked insane, much improved. Arm talent's there, accuracy is there, rushing ability. People want to make that comparison to Cam Newton, and I thought that was a bit rich. I don't think he's Cam Newton, but He can be Cam Newton 0.9. He could be 0.9 of what Cam Newton brought to the table at Auburn, because his rushing ability, I think, is underrated. He can force missed tackles. He's a body blow waiting to happen, can really wear down defenses that way. And the arm talent, the accuracy, the anticipatory throwing. I know he's got some of the best receivers in the country, but still, you just don't see other quarterbacks make those throws that he made this past week. Almost forgotten about because Graham Mertz, earned College Football Player of the Week at the quarterback position, but Fields, this offense is loaded with talent.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that week in and week out. And I always forget, every single time I'm writing an article with Justin Fields in there, I always go straight to his passing, and I'm like, you got to include some of his rushing numbers, but it's so hard to, just because he's in every single category at quarterback. His passing is, it's been bananas. And I think with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, just two refined route runners there. This offense is going to continue to cook. I think the matchup in this one I'm most looking forward to is Jason Owe versus Nicholas Petit-Ferrer. Just because he kind of lost a couple of reps. He didn't allow any pressures last week, but he did lose a couple of reps in pass protection to a not so great Nebraska defensive line. And the interior offensive line of Ohio State got cooked by them. But I think they're all going to bounce back. But I think Jason Owe, I think he's going to have a big game. But Shaka Toney, on the other hand, I don't know, with Theron Munford over there, I think he might get a little bit of a test there. But I think Jason Owe is going to have a big game.
This is going to be a very good one to watch. There's talent on both sides of the ball for both teams. Pat Freiermuth for Penn State is a tight end one candidate for some. I still like Kyle Pitts there. Jason Owe, Shaka Toney, the two defensive ends for Penn State you spoke to. You also have Sean Wade, the outside corner now for Ohio State, playing outside corner there. And then Tyreek Smith, who was an edge defender that was expected to kind of take this next step. Didn't have a fantastic week one in the Big Ten, but I still think Tyreek Smith is a name to watch in this game. This is must-watch college football. Ohio State, Penn State's always must-watch college football, but if you're a draft nut like you likely are, if you're listening to this podcast, Ohio State, Penn State is going to be
Don't
sick.
sleep on Seven Banks either, the other outside corner for Ohio State.
If you sleep on any outside corner that plays at Ohio State, you're probably missing out on a first-rounder.
Exactly.
They breed those out there in Columbus. All right, last college football game before we jump to the NFL. You put this one on here late. You just want to talk a little Zach Wilson, don't you? Western Kentucky versus BYU. It's a heavy spread. Zach Wilson's likely going to dominate. I'll lead with this question. I don't care about Western Kentucky. I don't really care what he does against them. Is Zach Wilson right now, if he finishes as this highest grade quarterback, 92, 93 plus overall grade, is he a first rounder in your opinion?
If he sustains this throughout the whole year, yes, 100%. Right now, 94.0 passing grade. That's right up there with one of the best we've ever seen. Granted, very bad defenses, but he is doing everything you can against a bad defense. He's top 3 in both negatively graded throw rate and positively graded throw rate. And if you're playing this cupcake schedule, you got to toast him, and he's toasting these guys. And so that's kind of what I'm looking forward to here, is if he wants to, at the college level, get into that Heisman conversation, put BYU in the playoffs conversation, he has to keep playing like this. He has to beat Western Kentucky by 20 points. So I think that's, I don't care about Western Kentucky. I care about BYU and Zach Wilson. And if he keeps playing like this, I think he is in that first-round conversation. And, it would be hard not to say he's not.
Because I will say I'm willing to throw competition out the window when you have the arm talent and the athleticism that Zach Wilson brings to the table. When you can clearly see this guy spins it different, that's when you get excited. Because you know who you don't get excited about? Dustin Crum of Kent State, who's playing against bad competition, earning really, really high PFF grades, but has a noodle, like an absolute noodle. You're not going to, we've seen it with Gardner Minshew at Washington State, one of the highest graded quarterbacks in all of college football when he came out. Fell to the 6th round, was not coveted by us, was a 5th rounder in our opinion, because he has a noodle of an arm, and you're limited at the next level. With Zach Wilson, yes, he's going against cupcake competition, but this guy can spin it. This guy has juice on those throws, and that is what you're willing to invest in at the next level. Yeah,
and it's kind of interesting how we don't talk about the competition level when it comes to Trey Lance's passing ability.
True.
We talk about his athleticism.
Yeah. And you talk about his arm talent.
Exactly. He's surefire. Maybe he's the best quarterback after Trevor Lawrence. We get those conversations, but we're looking at Zach Wilson. Oh, it's the competition's so bad. And it's even though it's been bad, it's better than what Trey Lance has faced. I think it's time to start recognizing what Zach Wilson is doing. And even though it's bad schedule, he's playing out of his mind.
All right, we're going to jump to the NFL. Before we do so, we're going to take a quick break, but I'm excited to talk Justin Jefferson, Michael Onwenu, get into the Herbert, Joe Burrow conversation again. A lot of good stuff coming up. Kicking off the NFL part of the podcast here, I want to talk Vikings-Packers, and there's only 2 names I got to bring up. Justin Jefferson, who's the highest graded rookie or one of the highest graded receivers in the NFL right now, dominating for the Minnesota Vikings. And he won't see this guy a ton, but I got to bring him out. He's a young player in the NFL that we really liked coming out of the draft is Jair Alexander, who's the highest graded cornerback in all of football. I doubt Jair shadows Justin Jefferson in the slot a ton. If he plays some outside reps, maybe we see it. But let's start with Justin Jefferson. What has surprised you the most about Justin Jefferson in the NFL? Has anything surprised you? He's gotten off to a really good start. Was not coveted as like a first round type of talent by PFF coming out. What has surprised you? What hasn't surprised you? Give me it.
Him beating single coverage as much as he has. I did not expect that. He was definitely, I'm going to say it, I was not high on Justin Jefferson. He was one of the prospects that I thought was being way overhyped. He's proved me definitely wrong. He's been excellent in single coverage, one of the highest graded wide receivers in those situations. And looking at 3 of his last 4 games, receiving grade above 91.0. Those are also 3 of the 8 best single games we've ever recorded by a rookie wide receiver in the PFF era.
Yeesh.
There's been a lot of rookie wide receivers. That's how good this guy's playing. And going back to their week 1 matchup, Adam Thielen, he cooked Minnesota or Green Bay there. And I think because Adam Thielen's always giving Green Bay fits. I think, and Justin Jefferson was a little quiet there, but now he's starting to come along. Mm-hmm. I could see a big game from both of those guys against this Green Bay team.
I think Justin Jefferson, I haven't been incredibly surprised by what he's done. When he's winning on the outside against single coverage, it's with double moves. And we've seen that at LSU. When he's winning in the slot, he's finding open holes in zone and winning after the catch. When he's in single coverage and not creating separation, he's coming down with contested targets. So his ball skills are something we loved at LSU. Few drops and always came down with the ball in contested catch situations. He's very much what we saw at LSU. I think what the problem for the evaluation for me was undervaluing what he did. I undervalued getting open against soft coverage and finding holes in zone. I undervalued his yards after the catch ability, undervalued his contested catch ability. And honestly, that is a big learning moment, I think, for me, because I was a big fan of Justin Jefferson originally, but was kind of talked down and kind of realized that, hey, like if you can't win single coverage consistently, you're consistently playing in the slot, it's hard to project you as a better outside or dominant receiver in the NFL. I stand corrected, man. You're running 11 personnel, 10 personnel, as much as teams are now. You need a Justin Jefferson on your football team. You need a guy that can do what he does from the slot, because it's not as replaceable as people think. It's not like you can put any slot receiver in there and he can have the production that Justin Jefferson does. So super excited for his future with the Minnesota Vikings.
The thing is with him too, like back in 2018, he was more on the outside. Mm-hmm. He did not win against single coverage.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the defining moment. And I know you always get better at the college level year after year, but not seeing that, in 2019.
And when he did win in 2018, it was with double moves out, like kind of schemed, like given that opportunity to create separation. If you can't create separation on double moves, there's something wrong. There's, like the defensive back is just in your bag there. But I do think I was concerned about his 2018 tape as well. Only earned like an 81.0, 81.2 PFF grade in 2018. That's where we were with Justin Jefferson. All right, Patriots-Bills, a little bit of a matchup here. Michael Onwenu, one of the highest graded players in the NFL right now, who's been absolutely dominant, specifically in the run game, also not getting completely torched as a pass blocker, going against Ed Oliver, second, third-year player for the Buffalo Bills, who's had good games so far this year. What has been your opinion of Onwenu, and when they do go toe-to-toe, who do you think wins that matchup?
Yeah, Onwenu's been interesting just because he's had to play like all over the offensive line, and he's been excellent at guard. I think there is a little bit of concern when he was over at tackle and pass protection, but he's been really good, there at guard and pass protection, and of course at run blocking, regardless where he's at. The guy is a filthy run blocker. But Ed Oliver, he had himself a game last week. Mm-hmm. I was really impressed.
He looks good this year, really good this year.
Yeah, and last year I thought it was a little bit of concern. I was kind of worried that he might get thrown into that bust label because we just didn't really see consistency from him. But this year, he's starting to come along. So this is going to be a fun matchup to watch.
All right, moving quickly. Chargers-Broncos. Justin Herbert, Drew Lock. Michael Ojemudia, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, all on the Denver Broncos side. 3 rookies that have had some flashes. Michael Ojemudia has been one of the better performing rookie cornerbacks in the NFL from a yards per coverage snap perspective. I want to start with the quarterback conversation, though. Justin Herbert and Drew Lock. Herbert has looked very good. I said on Monday's podcast that he's had a better rookie season so far than Joe Burrow. The high end in his game, the valuable throws he's hitting. For Drew Lock, I can't say the same. Drew Lock has not taken that step forward that Denver Broncos fans wanted from him. I think the Denver Broncos are one of those teams that probably need to invest in the quarterback position soon enough if they are in a position to draft one in this upcoming class. What has been your opinion of Herbert? I know we talked about it a ton on Monday, and then maybe lean more on what has been your opinion of Drew Lock.
Yeah, I think it's time to bite the bullet, to give up on Drew Lock. And I know it's been a small sample size. He's had some injuries there, but from the downfield passing perspective, it just the inaccuracy is unlike anything. Back in Missouri, he did not have this. He had beautiful touch throws downfield. We've hardly seen that. We saw it a couple of weeks ago on a few different throws, but we just have not consistently seen that from him. And I know a lot of traditional NFL minds are like, you got to give him a couple of years at least. But yeah, I think there's better options out there, especially in next year's draft class, to kind of pursue. And so I think they should almost fold in the towel, tank, and try and get
that win over New England was tough for them. I mean, that, they had a position because now they're 2-4. If they only had one win going into Week 8, you can really start to think about, we're getting after Justin Fields. We're in that Justin Fields conversation. We're in that Trey Lance conversation. Maybe Zach Wilson. But winning that game, and now maybe if they win a handful more, maybe you're drafting outside the top 5, outside the top 8, and it gets that much harder to invest in the quarterback position because you don't want to be that team that trades the future every single pick to try and get up there and grab a Justin Fields or whatever it be. You want to be in that prime position to grab one. And I don't think we're going to see a ton of trade-ups in this year's draft because so many of the teams drafting in the top 5 are going to be needing a quarterback. There's not going to be those teams that are like, we just drafted one, we don't need one. We're going to be like Washington last year with Chase Young. Any team that's drafting in the top 5 this year, I will say, even if it's the Cincinnati Bengals, are going to be in a position to say like, hey, let's swing the bat on one of these quarterbacks and make a play. Maybe not the Bengals if they're drafting 2 or 3. If they're drafting 1, though, the Bengals draft number 1 overall, I'm telling you, Trevor Lawrence is a pick. And you're going to trade Joe Burrow, whatever it may be. That just has to happen for the Cincinnati Bengals.
No. You have to. There is some GM out there that would literally trade the whole farm. They would trade the whole team for that number 1 overall pick.
So I'll say this. Yeah, okay, that's fair. I will still say this. If you're drafting number 1 overall, you're picking Trevor Lawrence. If you trade out of it, I get it. Cincinnati Bengals would probably be one of the...
I think the Cincinnati Bengals are the only team that if they're picking number 1 overall, they should trade the pick. That is the only team. All 31 other teams, you take Trevor Lawrence.
I wouldn't be completely opposed if they drafted Trevor Lawrence and traded Joe Burrow, because Trevor Lawrence, man, you get your because how much will they be beating themselves up if they had that chance at Trevor Lawrence and stuck with Joe Burrow? It doesn't pan out because Trevor Lawrence, man, he is that talent. All right, 2 more NFL games I want to talk. Let's go with Bucs Giants. A ton of rookies in this game that I think are going to be good ones to watch, starting with Tampa Bay. Antoine Winfield Jr. on his way to Defensive Rookie of the Year, honestly. He's made an impact, or like a significant impact, in every game he's played. Good in run defense, great in coverage, had his first pick, I think, of his NFL career this past week. Man, the instincts is what stood out at Minnesota, and it's what's standing out in the NFL. Throw the size out the window. Yeah, he's not an elite athlete. He did clock, I think, a 4.5, though, which was big for him. The injuries were the injuries, I think, the injuries and the size / tools were the biggest concerns for him at Minnesota. Playing football, the game, was never a concern. And you're seeing that in the NFL. The guy has instincts that are up there with like 5-6-year veterans. I'm in love with Antoine Winfield Jr. I hope you are as well.
Yeah, he looks exactly like he did at Minnesota out there. I was... So I got Justin Jefferson wrong, but I think I got Antoine Winfield Jr. right because I thought he was a first-round pick. I could not believe he fell as far as he did. I remember on draft night, I kept going pick after pick. I'm like, this team needs an Antoine Winfield. And they just kept passing and gifted him to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who already had a good defense. Now they have a great one because of Antoine Winfield.
Yeah, and they have, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a great defense because they invested in this philosophy of drafting defensive backs. Continue to throw the kitchen sink from a draft capital perspective at young defensive backs and wait for them to pan out. Jamel Dean, Carlton Davis, Mike Edwards, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Antoine Winfield Jr. They just kept throwing resource at trying to bring in these talented defensive backs. Eventually, you're going to find yourself like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do now with a top 5 defense, a really, really good secondary. And they did the same thing with a coverage linebacker in Devin White. Levante David has been very good. They don't need an elite pass rush. They don't need, Vita Vea, obviously, who's on the injured reserve now. Shaquille Barrett has not been the player that he was a couple years ago. I am impressed with what the Bucs have done from a roster build perspective to put together what is now a very, very good defense in the NFL. 2 tackles, 2 first-round offensive tackles we suiting up here. One who's been absolutely stellar to start his rookie career in Tristan Wirfs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Another one who's on pace to allow the worst pressure rate by a rookie offensive tackle in the history of PFF, dating back to 2006, in Andrew Thomas. Let's start with Andrew Thomas. This is a big concern. He was PFF's number 1 offensive tackle coming out of Georgia, was the first offensive tackle off the board for the New York Giants, and has looked out of sync, completely a different player than he was at Georgia. Can he be fixed? Are you already throwing in the white flag with Andrew Thomas, or do you think there's there's greener pastures maybe in year 2, year 3.
Yeah, I am a little concerned now. I wasn't a few weeks ago, but it's been really ugly for him. I mean, it's pretty rare to see, even if you're a rookie playing this bad, to make that kind of jump to, where you're actually a good offensive tackle. So I'm really concerned. I think Tristan Wirf's going to end up by far the better NFL player.
Yes.
Tristan Wirf, going back to that game against the Chargers and Joey Bosa, he shut him down. I mean, one of the better pass rushers in the NFL. He shut down Joey Bosa. Khalil Mack got to him, but I mean, Khalil Mack gets to everybody. Yeah. And he still held his ground there. So Andrew Thomas, I'm ready to press the panic button.
The panic button has been pressed, if not smashed.
The off the field, too.
The off the field. Yeah. I mean, he's late to that meeting, gets benched for Matt Pert. Matt Pert comes in, grades well. What are we doing here? Late to a meeting when you're playing as bad as you are? That's a bad look, man. Yeah. That's a bad look. I love Tristan Wirfs, though. The guy's playing out of his mind. We had him on the podcast, I think, a handful of times. Dude's super nice guy, otherworldly athlete and lifter. Not surprised that the NFL doesn't look too big for this guy because he had all of the tools to be great in the NFL. I was surprised he honestly wasn't the first tackle off the board. I wouldn't have been surprised if Gettleman was considering Wirfs and Thomas in that same meld because Tristan Wirfs, man, super special. And it's crazy because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we talked about need entering that draft, and it was offensive tackle. And we talked about them potentially trading up for one. The fact they were able to stay put and get him where they did was pretty incredible for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Or did they trade up? I think
they traded up one spot.
Yeah. But I didn't expect them. I thought they would have to trade up more to get a talent like Tristan Wirfs. It's good that they do have him now. Yeah. All right, last game, save the best for last year. Tua Tagovailoa is making his debut for the Miami Dolphins. There's a handful of other talented first-year, second-year players in this game. David Long Jr., Taylor Rapp, Noah Benogany. Terrell Burgess won't be playing. He's out for the season with a fractured ankle, I believe. But Tua Tagovailoa, what are your expectations for him going against the Los Angeles Rams defense, Aaron Donald included?
Yeah, he's going to get baptized by fire. He's going to get killed out there by Aaron Donald. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. So we
all do at a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting him to put up, a jaw-dropping performance where he might be player of the week or something like that. I'm expecting maybe a PFF grade in the low 70s at best because of Aaron Donald. He's going to be under pressure a lot. But it's the coverage unit too. I mean, Seth wrote a great article too about this Rams defense. I mean, it's Jalen Ramsey's playing exceptional football right now. So, I mean, I think he's going to struggle. It was kind of interesting to see. I understand why they did it before the bye, but you look at the Rams defense, I would not want to put Tua Tagovailoa, who has not played since this gruesome injury, and against one of the best defenses in the NFL.
So I don't get it. I don't get why they went to Tua Tagovailoa after the bye. Ryan Fitzpatrick was playing a winning brand of football behind a bad offensive line with a middling receiving core and a defense that's very young and still learning. Tua Tagovailoa is now going to go into that same situation, play a very conservative brand of football, not going to be the roller coaster high end that Ryan Fitzpatrick is capable of. I think this offense ADOT is going to cut in half. You're not going to see these aggressive throws downfield. You're not going to see the same confidence that Ryan Fitzpatrick brings to the table. I ultimately think a Miami Dolphins team that was potentially in for that 7th, 6th spot in the AFC as a playoff contender, no way they make the playoffs with Tua Tagovailoa. I think this offense takes a significant step back, and I like Tua Tagovailoa as a prospect, but I don't think bringing him in now after this catastrophic injury with the supporting cast is going to lead to better results than what they would have had with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think that's the concern for me. And here's what I would hate to see. Tua Tagovailoa comes in. They lose a couple games. Couple games they probably should lose. And then they bring back in Ryan Fitzpatrick to try and go chase the playoffs. That would be absurd to me. If Tua Tagovailoa doesn't start every single game for the rest of this year, regardless of the outcome, it would be a concern for me because then you're just like middling opinions, and I think that would be a problem. And everyone wants to say, well, you have to see Tua Tagovailoa play. You have to see what you have in him. Patrick Mahomes played one game before he went into year 2 and dominated as the starter of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm not saying Tua Tagovailoa is Patrick Mahomes, but you don't need to see it in a live game for a rookie quarterback to feel confident in him starting in his 2nd or 3rd year. You could see it one game or see it late in games where they're winning and then still have that same outcome, especially if your team is still competent and a point to where you can make a playoffs in a bad AFC East and a bad overall AFC where the playoffs have been extended from 6 teams to 7. I still don't love the move. I'm interested to see how he plays against Aaron Donald, but I do think you said it best in that he's going to be baptized by fire going against what is a very good Los Angeles Rams defense. All right. That's going to do it for the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast this episode here. Anthony Treash is going to be on for a while, I think. Unless Mike Renner gets a negative test, Treash is coming
How long's
on
the season of the Bachelorette?
and that's maybe through the end of the Bachelorette, but Treash could even be on the podcast next week. Make sure you tune into that. Follow him on Twitter at PFF_Anthony. But until next time, make sure you rate and review the podcast, by the way, leaving comments. It keeps food on the table for Treash, Mike, and myself. But until next time, Austin Gayle, Anthony Treash, 2-for-1 drafts.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.